We fought every day at work, until I found out I was the Korean CEO's wife. The conference room was tense. Olivia Chen slammed the report on the glass table so hard the sound echoed off the walls. "You're sabotaging my department on purpose," she shouted at the CEO, Min Jae Park, who watched her with that impenetrable expression she hated. He crossed his arms slowly, his low voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Perhaps if you followed procedures instead of acting on impulse, we wouldn't be having this conversation again." Olivia's eyes burned. "Procedures? You reject every creative proposal I present. It's like you want me to fail." Min Jae stepped closer, so close she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow. "Or perhaps," he murmured, his voice strangely soft, "I'm trying to protect you from something you don't understand yet." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Park, we need to talk about your husband. Urgent." Olivia froze. Mrs. Park? What kind of joke was this? She looked at Min Jae, who had turned his back, his shoulders tense in a way she had never seen before. Something was very, very wrong. 3 months earlier, Olivia Chen had arrived at Park Enterprises as the new marketing manager. She had heard about the rigorous Korean CEO who had transformed a startup into a corporate powerhouse in 5 years, but nothing prepared her for Min Jae Park in person. On her first day, she presented an innovative campaign full of boldness and visual creativity. Min Jae listened in silence, then simply said, "Rejected. Too risky. Next." In the following days, every idea she proposed was cut or criticized. "You don't understand the Korean market," he would say. "You act like you know everything, but have much to learn." The arguments became daily, sometimes in front of the entire team. Operations Director James Walsh watched with growing concern as the tension intensified. But there was something strange. When Olivia worked late, she always found fresh coffee on her desk in the morning, exactly how she liked it, with almond milk and vanilla. When she caught a cold, Korean ginger tea appeared with a note. "For your health." No signature. When she asked around, no one knew who left them. The mystery deepened when Olivia discovered references to a Mrs. Park in old company files from 2 years ago, financial transfers, property deeds, even a joint bank account still active. But Min Jae Park was known as the eternal bachelor, who lived only for work. She started investigating discreetly. An elderly Korean accountant, Mrs. Kim, looked at her strangely when asked about the CEO's personal life. "Some things are not meant to be discussed," the woman said softly, her eyes holding sadness. "Sometimes love means letting someone forget." The words haunted Olivia for days. Meanwhile, Min Jae's behavior became increasingly contradictory. He would publicly criticize her work, then privately send detailed notes showing he'd spent hours analyzing every detail. He rejected her presentations, but she discovered he was implementing modified versions weeks later. When a male colleague spoke dismissively to her in a meeting, Min Jae's voice turned to ice. "Ms. Chen's opinion was not finished. You will listen respectfully, or find yourself looking for employment elsewhere." The room fell silent. Olivia met Min Jae's eyes across the table, and for a brief second, she saw something raw and unguarded before his mask slammed back into place. There were other strange moments too. During a company dinner with international clients, Min Jae had positioned himself next to her, subtly redirecting conversation whenever someone asked too personal questions. When she'd reached for a dish containing shellfish, his hand had shot out instinctively to stop her. Then he'd frozen, realizing what he'd done. "Allergies," he'd said curtly, pulling his hand back as if burned. But how did he know about her shellfish allergy? She'd never mentioned it at work. Another time, during a late evening at the office, Olivia had been struggling with a particularly difficult client proposal. She'd been on the verge of tears from frustration when she'd found a note slipped under her door in that same precise handwriting. "You're stronger than you know. Trust yourself. The answer is already in your mind." The words had given her the confidence to push through, and the next morning, her revised proposal had been exactly what the client needed. But when she'd tried to thank Min Jae, he'd simply nodded curtly and walked away, leaving her more confused than ever. The breaking point came during the company's biggest presentation of the year. Olivia had worked for weeks on a campaign bridging Korean and American aesthetics. Min Jae reviewed it the night before, called her into his office at midnight when the building was empty. "This is brilliant," he said quietly, and Olivia's heart stopped because he had never complimented her work. "It's everything I hoped you would create." She stared at him, confused. "Then why do you fight me on everything?" Min Jae walked to the window overlooking the New York skyline. His reflection looked tired, older than his 34 years. "Because 2 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And every day since I've been trying to fix it." He turned to face her, pain naked in his eyes. "The accident, the one that took your memories, the one that made you forget you were ever my wife." The room spun. "That's impossible. I would remember being married. I would remember you." But even as she said it, fragments surfaced, the familiar smell of his cologne, the way her hands knew the layout of his office, dreams of a Korean wedding ceremony she dismissed as fantasies. Min Jae pulled out his phone with shaking hands, showed her photos that made her world tilt, a younger version of herself in a white handbook, radiant with joy, holding hands with Min Jae, who looked at her like she was his entire universe. Their wedding day, reception photos with both families, candid shots of them in this office, laughing. "We had been married 6 months when the accident happened," Min Jae said, his voice breaking. "A car crash. You were in a coma for 3 weeks. When you woke up, you had retrograde amnesia. You couldn't remember the last 3 years. You couldn't remember me." Tears streamed down Olivia's face. "The doctors said forcing memories could cause psychological damage. They said we had to let you recover naturally. Your parents agreed. We all agreed to give you space, to let you heal." Min Jae's hands clenched. "But I couldn't stay away. So I waited until you recovered, until you decided to return to work, and I created a position for you here. I told myself I would watch over you, make sure you were safe, and wait for your memories to return naturally." His voice was raw with emotion. "But then you walked into that first meeting and looked at me like I was a stranger. You were so confident, so brilliant, but you didn't know me. You didn't remember our conversations about building something meaningful together. You didn't remember how we'd argue about strategy, then laugh over dinner. You didn't remember that you loved Korean food, that you'd learned to make kimchi from my mother." He ran a hand through his hair. "I tried to keep my distance professionally, but every time you pitched an idea, it was like watching you come alive, the way you used to. I criticized because I was terrified that if I supported you too obviously, people would ask questions. Terrified that if I got too close, I would break down and tell you everything before you were ready. Terrified you would never remember." "The coffee, the tea, the notes, that was you," Olivia whispered. "Always me," he said. "I couldn't stop taking care of you. Every morning I came in early. Every time you worked late, I stayed later to make sure you got home safely. When you were sick, it killed me not to take you home myself." The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. The way Min Jae always knew when she was struggling, the protective way he positioned himself between her and others, how he memorized her schedule, always making sure she didn't overwork, the fury in his eyes when anyone disrespected her. It wasn't animosity, it was love, desperate and constrained. "James knows," Olivia said suddenly. "That's why he always looks worried when we argue." Min Jae nodded. "He's been my best friend since college. He's watched me die slowly every day for 2 years, loving someone who doesn't remember loving me back. He kept telling me I should walk away, but I couldn't. Even if you never remember, even if you hate me forever, I need to know you're okay." The message on her phone made sense now. It was from Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the neurologist who had treated her. Olivia called the number with shaking hands. Dr. Mitchell answered immediately. "Mrs. Park, I'm so glad you called. Your latest MRI showed significant changes. The neural pathways associated with your lost memories are reconnecting. You might start experiencing memory returns, possibly quite suddenly." The doctor continued explaining the science behind memory recovery, how trauma could lock away memories, but the brain never truly erased them. The pathways had been damaged, not destroyed, and over time, with the right stimulus, they could rebuild themselves. "Sometimes," Dr. Mitchell said gently, "emotional triggers can accelerate the process. Being near someone deeply connected to those lost memories, even without conscious recognition, can create the conditions for recovery. Mr. Park's presence in your life, even in a professional capacity, may have been helping your brain heal all along. As if the doctor's words unlocked something, images flooded Olivia's mind like a breaking dam. Min Jae proposing on a rooftop restaurant, their first apartment, tiny but filled with love, late nights working together, arguments about marketing that ended in laughter and kisses, his mother teaching her to make bulgogi, planning their wedding, choosing between Korean and American traditions, the car ride, then the screech of tires, the impact, Min Jae screaming her name, waking in the hospital, not understanding why this stranger held her hand like she was his whole world. The devastating moment when doctors explained she couldn't remember him, his promise, whispered through tears. "I'll wait. However long it takes." Olivia gasped as 2 years of missing memories crashed back. "Min Jae," she whispered, and the way she said his name was different now, weighted with recognition and love. He looked at her, hope and fear warring in his eyes. "Olivia." She crossed the space between them, touched his face with trembling hands. "You kept your promise. You waited for me." Min Jae's composure shattered. He pulled her into his arms, his whole body shaking. "I would have waited forever. I would have loved you from a distance for the rest of my life if that's what you needed. I remember," Olivia said through tears, holding him tight. "I remember our wedding. I remember moving to New York together. I remember how we used to argue about everything, then laugh. I remember falling in love with you and Min Jae. I remember being so incredibly happy." They stood there holding each other as 2 years of pain finally found release. All the arguments suddenly made perfect sense. He hadn't been cruel. He had been breaking apart trying to protect her while dying inside. When they pulled apart, Min Jae cupped her face, his touch achingly gentle. "I was so afraid that even if you remembered, you might not feel the same anymore." Olivia laughed through tears. "Are you kidding? I fell in love with you all over again, you impossible man. Even when I thought you hated me, there was always something. My heart remembered even when my mind didn't." She kissed him softly. "Though I have to say, your method of protecting me by criticizing all my work was terrible. We're going to have a long conversation about communication skills." Min Jae laughed, lighter than she'd heard in months. "I deserve that. James has been telling me for 2 years my plan was idiotic." "James is a smart man," Olivia agreed. "We should probably tell him before he has an aneurysm from watching us fight." The next morning, Olivia walked into Park Enterprises, wearing her wedding ring, the one Min Jae had kept safe in his desk drawer for 2 years. The staff's shocked faces were almost comical as Min Jae met her at the elevator, kissed her in front of everyone, and announced calmly, "For those who don't know, this is my wife. She's been my wife for over 2.5 years. Yes, I know the fighting was confusing. Long story. Any questions can be directed to Director Walsh, who is probably in his office celebrating right now." James indeed was celebrating, tears of relief in his eyes when they found him. "Thank God," he said, hugging them both. "Do you know how hard it is to watch your best friend's heart break every single day?" Over the following weeks, Olivia and Min Jae rebuilt their relationship, combining who they had been with who they had become. Some things were the same: their passionate debates about strategy, their complementary visions, the way they challenged each other. Some things were different. Olivia had grown more independent during her memory loss. Min Jae had learned patience. Together, they were stronger. The campaign Olivia developed was launched to massive success, bridging Korean and American markets exactly as she'd envisioned. Min Jae presented it with her, introducing her not just as marketing manager, but as his partner in every sense. The media coverage was overwhelming, with business journals praising their innovative approach and the authentic cultural fusion they had achieved. Their story, though kept private, seemed to infuse every aspect of their work with deeper meaning. Employees noticed the change immediately. The tension that had permeated the office for months had transformed into something beautiful. People whispered about seeing them leave together, laughing in the parking garage, sharing lunch in his office with the door open. The company culture shifted, becoming warmer, more collaborative, as if their reunited love had set an example of what vulnerability and authenticity could achieve. Their parents were overjoyed when they visited together. Min-jae's mother cried and held her long, whispering in Korean about prayers answered. 6 months later, Olivia stood in the same conference room where everything had changed. Min-jae entered for their weekly strategy meeting, but this time there was no tension, just love and partnership. "I have a proposal," she said, smiling at the word. "The expansion into the Korean market needs a personal touch. I think we should spend 6 months in Seoul, build relationships there, maybe open a second office." Min-jae raised an eyebrow. "You want to move to Korea? You who once told me you could never live anywhere but New York?" "I want to understand that part of you better," Olivia said softly. "The part I missed when I lost my memories. Your culture, your language, your roots. Besides, your mother has been hinting about wanting us closer. And—" She paused, her hand moving to her stomach, where a tiny secret was just beginning to grow. "Our child should know both sides of their heritage from the beginning." Min-jae's eyes widened, then filled with tears of joy. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "You're pregnant?" "Just found out yesterday," Olivia confirmed, laughing as he spun her gently. "Surprise! Though given your protective instincts, I'm terrified to see what you'll be like as an expectant father." "I'll be impossible," Min-jae admitted cheerfully, "but you love me anyway." "I do," Olivia agreed, "even when we're fighting, even when you're being overprotective, even when I couldn't remember why I was drawn to you. Always." They kissed, and outside the glass walls, the staff of Park Enterprises smiled and went about their work, long accustomed now to the CEO and his wife's love story. The story of how 2 people could lose everything and find each other again, how love could survive even when memory failed, how fighting sometimes meant caring so deeply it hurt. Looking back, Olivia realized that every argument, every frustrating interaction, every moment of tension had been a piece of their love story, trying to break through the walls of her amnesia. Min-jae had fought for her in the only way he could, protecting her from a distance, loving her silently, waiting with infinite patience for her to find her way back to him. And she had fought back, her heart recognizing what her mind couldn't remember, drawn to him even when she thought she disliked him, unable to stay away from the one person who made her feel most alive. Their story wasn't conventional. It was messy and painful and complicated, but it was theirs. Every difficult moment a testament to love that refused to give up, even against impossible odds. As they stood together looking out at the city where they had built their life, lost it and found it again, Olivia knew that some bonds couldn't be broken, not by accident, not by amnesia, not by time. Love like theirs didn't just survive. It transformed, it adapted, it waited, and ultimately, it conquered all. The conference room that had witnessed so many of their battles now held only peace as Min-jae pulled Olivia close, his hand resting protectively over where their child grew. "I love you," he whispered in Korean, then English, making sure she understood in every language. "I never stopped. I never will." "I know," Olivia whispered back. "Even when I didn't remember, some part of me always knew. You were the piece I was missing, the answer to a question I didn't know how to ask. You were home even when I didn't recognize the address." They had fought every day at work, but every fight had been love-wearing armor, protection disguised as conflict, 2 hearts trying desperately to find their way back to each other across the distance of forgotten memories. And now, finally, they were exactly where they belonged, together. Remember that the strongest love stories aren't the ones without obstacles. They're the ones where love persists despite every reason to give up, where 2 people choose each other again and again, even when the world tries to keep them apart. Min-jae and Olivia's story proves that true love can survive anything, even the loss of memory itself, because real love isn't just remembered by the mind. It's written in the heart, and the heart never truly forgets. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in love that conquers all, please subscribe to K-Drama Tales and hit that notification bell so you never miss our stories of love, redemption, and the extraordinary power of the human heart to find its way home.